Greetings, loved ones. Like other forms of abuse, emotional child abuse is about power and control. The abuser manipulates and controls the child by using words and actions that are emotionally hurtful and damaging. Today we're going to talk about emotional child abuse. Please help us get these messages out. Please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button and the notification bell, and please share these messages with others. You could save a life. So what is emotional child abuse? Emotional abuse, which is sometimes called psychological abuse, is a pattern of behavior that damages a child's sense of self-worth and negatively impacts their emotional development. In addition to withholding love and support, the person emotionally abusing the child also may reject, criticize, threaten, demand, and berate the child. They may also humiliate the child, engage in name-calling, and insult them. Emotional abuse can occur in conjunction with physical abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect, and it is one of the hardest forms of abuse to recognize. Often it is subtle and insidious, slowly chipping away at the child's self-esteem. Like other forms of abuse, emotional child abuse is about power and control. The abuser manipulates and controls the child by using words and actions that are emotionally hurtful and damaging. So let's talk about some signs of emotional child abuse. Although an emotionally abused child might not end up in the hospital with a broken bone or a concussion, the effects of emotional abuse can be damaging and long-lasting. In 2017, 2.3% of the children in the United States experienced psychological or emotional abuse, according to a report prepared by the Administration of Children, Youth, and Families. This estimate is likely low because emotional abuse can be harder to detect than any other form of child abuse, and it typically takes place in the confines of a child's home. There might not be any obvious outward signs that abuse is taking place. Sometimes a child's behavior is the only thing that indicates that there are problems at home. So let's talk about some of this inappropriate behavior, such as acting very immature or a little bit too mature for their age. These can be signs of abuse, as can dramatic behavioral changes. For example, a child who used to be slightly aloof and did not seek attention might suddenly become clingy to non-abusive adults or compulsively seek affection from them. You might assume that a child being abused in any way wouldn't be attached to the adult caregiver who is abusing them, but this is not always the case. Children often remain loyal to the parent or caregiver who is abusing them because they are afraid of what will happen if they disclose the abuse. An emotionally abused child also might think that being called names or denied affection is a normal way of life. They might not tell anyone about the abuse because they believe their experiences represent normal family behavior. So let's talk about identifying emotional abuse. A child who is being emotionally abused, they may demonstrate behaviors that can be signs of abuse, including anxiety, attempts to avoid certain situations such as going to an activity or to another person's house, declining performance at school, delayed emotional development, depression, desire to hurt themselves or other people on purpose, desperately seek affection from other adults, developmental regression, for example, bedwetting or stooling after previously mastering bladder and bowel control. There can be frequent complaints of headaches, stomach aches, or other somatic symptoms with no known cause. They may have a loss of interest in social activities or other interests, and they may have low self-esteem. So let's talk about traits of abusers who do emotional abuse. There are also signs in adult caregivers that might indicate they are abusing a child. Things like belittling the child in public, openly admitting to disliking or hating the child, applying severe punishments, having unrealistic expectations, and being emotionally distant or indifferent are emotionally abusive behaviors. Meanwhile, some people who abuse children have a history of violence and aggression or have substance abuse disorders. If you believe a child is being emotionally abused, don't automatically assume that the abuse is being perpetrated by the child's parents. While a child is more likely to be abused by a caregiver or family, any authority figure can be abusive. For instance, a coach, a daycare worker, a teacher, a pastor, or even an older sibling could be abusing the child. So there are different types of emotional child abuse, and they can take several forms. At one end of the spectrum are insults or belittling words or actions, while the other end can be total indifference that causes emotional deprivation. A caregiver who is emotionally abusive often uses words, but their actions also can be abusive, and sometimes it's a lack of action that is abusive. When a parent or a caregiver doesn't show a child love or make them feel wanted, secure, and worthy, these actions result in emotional deprivation. People who are abusive also may withhold physical affection or loving touch, both of which are essential to a child's emotional development. Any adult in a child's life can be emotionally abusive, and the abuse can take many forms. So here are some examples of emotional abuse of a child. A babysitter constantly screams at the kids and makes threats. A child is exposed to domestic violence at home. A grandparent refuses to interact with the children when they visit and instead watches television. A parent with alcohol use disorder gets angry when they drink, often yelling and screaming all night long. Or a step-parent says that they wish a child didn't exist. A teacher makes fun of a child in front of the class when they struggle to read aloud. Another example is after a divorce, a parent asks their child to lie to a judge about the other parent to ensure that they will gain full custody. According to the CDC, over half of all children in the world, it blows my mind, 1 billion children ages 2 to 17 experience violence every year. The question is not if you will encounter violence. The question before God is what will you do when you encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. So if you're a victim of violence, if you're suffering violence, I want you to listen to me. I want you to know that you are valued. I want you to know that you are loved, and you are intelligent, and yes, you are worthy. God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free from violence in peace and tranquility. And I want you to know that there is a way out. You are not trapped. It's not your fault. Abuse is not love. And I want you to know that you are not alone. So if you're suffering violence, reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. And if you know of a child or other person who's suffering violence, please tell the authorities. In our next episode, we will continue talking about emotional child abuse. Until then, God bless you.